Okay, well, I think it's time for our program. And Steve Betow, the program director, probably had some real nice introduction in mind for our guest demonstrator today, but I'll wing it since I don't have what Steve must have had in his notes. But Vaughn Graber is going to be demonstrating one of my favorite areas of wood turning, and that's segmented wood turning. And Vaughn, I know, has been real prolific with segmented work. He's got work on display and has gotten notoriety in the Topeka area. He even has exhibited as far west as Lincoln, Kansas, where my wife and I went to an art show there and saw him present his work. He's got some really great projects he's produced. He's got a lot of technique and a lot of experience that I know he's willing to share with us this morning. So, Vaughn, thank you for your effort in putting this together. Look forward to hearing it. So, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you for the encouraging words there. Yeah, today we're going to talk about segmented turning. Get the first picture there. This is basic segmented. We cut little pieces, glue them together, and stack them up, and then turn them. And then we're also going to talk about open segmented. Get the next picture. Open segmented, where it's a very similar process, but you leave little spaces in between the segments. So we'll be talking about those two today, and then you can also combine both techniques into the same project. So the first thing we need to do is design a project. One of the first things we need to do is design a project, and there are numerous ways that you can do that. You can look at books. There's various books out on for sale. That's one method. Another method would be using a mold kit template pattern for your design. Other things are magazines such as the AAW. They have, every now and then, they'll have a plan in the magazine that shows from start to finish on making a segmented vessel. There's also PC programs that I don't have one. I've seen them, but you can design projects with the PC program. And then there's pictures out of magazines or books, such as this one. You can get ideas on what you want to make out of magazines, books, or you can design your own. Make a graph paper or take a chart paper and design your own project, this is one that we're going to be talking about today. Then the next thing you need to do is have something that you can cut the segments on, such as a sled. Some people, I use a table saw to cut my segments. Some people use band saws. Some people use chop saws. I've even heard of people using routers. I don't know how a router works. Anyway, that's some ways to do it. Once you have this process to cut the segments, you need to be able to cut them at the exact angle. You can't be off very much on the angle, or you'll have gaps in between the segments. What I started out using was a conventional sled. This is the conventional sled. We went black here. Okay, we're back. Everybody still with us?
Yes. I
Okay.
am.
This is the conventional sled. Turn it this way a little bit. It consists of a fence right here. A runner for the miter slot in your in the table saw. And this angle then is the exact angle, 11.25 degrees for a 16-piece segment. Yeah, just a second. So we're gonna decide how to figure out the angle that you need. This Ray Allen book is probably the best book that I have as far as making segments or doing segmented turning. It's got a definition of segments here. Tells you how to figure the angle. And if you look down here, the angle, to get the miter angle, you take circumference of a circle, which is 360 degrees. You divide that by the number of segments in your project. We're talking about a 16-piece segment. The angle then is 22.5 degrees. Since you've got two sides to each segment, you have to divide that by 2, and that gives you 11.25 degrees for the miter angle. When you build your sled for 16-degree segment cut, that's the exact angle that you're going to need. So then we'll go through how to design and build a sled. Get that next picture up. Okay, what I did building this sled is, you can see on the right-hand side of the sled, there's a bolt that comes up through the bottom, through the fence. Now, this enables the fence to move. I got something to set the fence at a 11.25 degree angle with the saw blade, and then I put a clamp on the left-hand side of the fence to hold it in place while I cut a number of segments. So if we go to the next one. Then you need a stop block set up for the length of the segments you want, and then just start cutting segments. You need about a 4-inch stop block, and this is a new stop block that I've made. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, there. This goes up against the saw fence, and then this, of course, is your stop block where you made from your saw blade to this. Okay. Go back to the okay, now we're set up and ready to cut some segments. So go with the next. You cut 16 segments on the saw. You can see 5 of them there and getting ready to cut another one. Go to the next one there. We cut that last one, so now we got 6. So now, next one. Now we glue the segments or dry clamp them or glue them together. And if there's any gap, then your angle is not correct. And you can see on these two examples, the gap on the inside of the segment. If the gap's on the inside of the segment, you need to decrease the angle. If the gap's on the outside of the segment, you need to increase the angle. So you make your change in your sled fence, cut another 16 and dry clamp them until you get them to look like this one, where they're pretty much, well, that is exact. There's no gap at all there. So then once you get that set, you screw the fence down to the board, and now you've got a permanent fence for the 16-piece segmented ring. So once that's how you build that saw or that sled, and then this, like I say, I first started using this type, and then a fellow by the name of Jerry Bennett came out with the Wedgie Sled, and so that's what I've started using now. I'll show you an example of that Wedgie Sled. There we go. It's it's got two fences instead of one. It does have the runner on the bottom side to fit in the miter slot. This is the side that goes against the blade. And to set this up, they've got wedges, whereas the conventional sled is dedicated to a 16-piece. This sled can be used in a number of different angles, and you can use it for 8-piece, 10-piece, clear up to a 64-piece ring. But you purchase these wedges, set them in there, tighten your fence down, both fences, and you're ready to cut. The directions on making the sled are at segeasy.com. The wedges can be purchased at segeasy.com. And if you go to segeasy.com, a gentleman by the name of Jerry Bennett has 3 YouTube videos. One of them on how to build the sled, and then one of them how the sled functions. So this is more economical, I guess you might say, than building 10 conventional sleds for 10 different numbered segment rings. The only problem with this sled, excuse me, is that the width between here only allows you to cut a certain width of segment. If you're cutting this size width, it works good. If you're cutting something this wide, it doesn't work so good. So what I've done is the wider segments that I can't cut in here, I use my conventional sled for that. Now you can convert this into a conventional sled, and you do that by reversing the wedgie, put it on the sled. You have a piece of wood to put against that, and then you tighten it down. And now this becomes a conventional sled. With a conventional sled, I should have showed you this on the other one, but when you're cutting, you make a cut, you flip it, make a cut, flip it, make a cut. This sled, you have a line on the top of your stick, one on the edge of your stick. You put the one on the edge up against the fence, and keep the same orientation from top to bottom when you're using the wedgie. So when you're using this as a conventional sled, then you have to flip. So that's, if you have something, if you just want to use the wedgie sled and you have a piece that's wider than in between these two fences, then you can turn this into a conventional sled and cut the wider pieces that way. I haven't tried it that way, but according to Jerry Bennett, it works. And he shows you how it works. So if you go to segeasy.com, you can see the direction on how to build this sled, how it works, and it's really a good thing. Okay, so now we've got our sleds built. We've got our ways to cut the segments. Like I say, I use a table saw. Now you need to know, you need to design a project and then start doing it. So in this book, I think we work here. Well, I might have to come down a little. In this book, there's a number of patterns. This again is wood turning with Ray Allen by Dale Nish. There's 6 or 7 patterns in this book that shows you everything you need to know. It shows you the diameter of the ring you're shooting for, the number of pieces in the ring, segments, which is 16, the thicknesses of all the pieces, the length of each segment, and the width of each segment, and the angle that it needs to be cut at. So that's a very good tool to use. Now the way that you figure the angle of each segment, the way you figure the length of the segments is the diameter of the ring that you're wanting to make times pi, which is 3.1416. And that gives you the circumference of the ring. And then you divide that by the number of segments that you want in that ring. And that gives you the segment length. So here's an example down here for a 16 piece segment. You want an 8 1/4 inch ring. So you multiply that times pi, gives you 25.91. Divide that by 16. That gives you your segment length of 1.610 inches. So if you don't have a caliper to measure your length, you have to figure out somehow to convert that back to a fraction. I'll show you how to do that. But anyway, so then the segment itself is defined here as the length This is what you're figuring out using this, is what you're trying to figure out how long the segment should be to make the ring come out to be 8.25 inches. The width then is from the front to the back of the segment, and that allows you to turn and not run out of wood. So you need a certain length on that, or width on that, and then the thickness, of course, is how thick the segment is. So we're going to look at this. This is the one that was designed today for what we're going to basically video turn. And you can see that the outline of each layer or each ring. I've got the width or the diameter of each ring on the left-hand side, 4.5, 5, 6, 7, and 8. On the right-hand side is the thickness of each ring. Determined what I want the rings to be made out of. Like the base is going to be birch. First ring is, and first, second, and third rings are going to be a walnut and birch combination. And then the top ring is going to be birch. So, based on what we said, the formula for figuring the segment length, I just showed you in the book. But who wants to figure that out all the time? I sure know. So, in one of these books that I've got, there's a handy dandy little chart. It's Segmented Turning, a Complete Guide by Ron Hampton. I found this very helpful. Chart, the back of it. There we go. So down this column, it tells you the number of segments you want in each ring. These tells you the segment angle, like a 16 is 11.25. The top row is the diameter of the ring you want. So in the example that we've making here today, we'll just take the fourth ring, which is 8 inches in diameter. So I go to this table, I come down to 16 segments, and then I go over 8 inches. It's 1.591 inches is what each segment length has to be in order to make a 8-inch diameter ring. So you do that for each. You do that for each ring you want to do, and then once you get your numbers for your rings, like the 1.591. Again, if you don't have a caliper or something to set it up, an inch, 0.591 inches, then I made a little chart where I converted the decimals into fractions. And if you look up here, 0.591 is between 9/16 and 19/32. So what I would do is split the difference. And I measure the length. I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. And that'll give you close to an 8-inch ring. And who cares if it's 8 and 1/64 in diameter, or if it's 7 63/64 in diameter. I just prefer to just be real close to 8 or 8, whatever. But anyway, this seems to work for me. So I would set it at 1 inch and somewhere between 9/16 and 19/32 using a tape measure. Okay, so we've got our pattern drawn. We've got our segments figured out, how long they need to be cut, how wide they need to be cut. I should have showed you how you figure the width. And the width, if you measure from this point to this point, it's going to give you a number. And that tells you the width that you're going to have to get this. So you have enough wood to turn down without running out or going through the side. So I take that number and then add about 1/2 inch onto it. And that should give you enough to not go through the side wall of the vessel. If you look up here, you can see where the fourth ring was 1.591, the other one was ring 3 was 1.392, and so on up to here. We've got our sticks that are 3/4 inch thick, about 1.5 inches. So it has everything you need to know right here when you go to cut your segments. Now we'll set up and start cutting segments with the wedgie sled. So if we can get the first picture there. We have to set the wedgie sled up. I think I showed you how that was done. You put your wedgie in there and move your fences up next to it. Go to the next slide. I didn't show you this when I was showing you how I cut the segments to make the first conventional sled, but I now use a segment deflector, which is a zero clearance insert for the table saw with a piece of wood screwed from the bottom up, screwed to it. And when you cut your segments in, they'll go on the top of that, slide over and fall down and get away from the saw blade. So that's kind of a safety factor. Then we got the fence, the stop block set up, and this is where you measure your length of your segment. So this is the tape measure is set close to 1.1 inch and 9/16, somewhere in between that and 19/32. So then what I do is move the stop block back quite a ways back from and then attach it to the fence with a C-clamp. Okay, next slide. So now we're ready to start cutting our segments, and you can see we got the stick lined up with the demarcation lines on top, and then the ones facing the fence. And that's the position it's going to be in through all of this process. So it's square on the end right now, so we want to cut an angle to start making our segments. So we've cut the tip off to get the first angle. Okay. Then we move it on the top fence, measure through and run it through again, and we've got our first segment cut. Next slide. And we bring it back and get the length with the stop block and run it through the fence again. Now we've got 2 segments. We put it on top again, run it through. Okay. And now we've got the 8 segments. Excuse me. We got the 8 segments of the birch cut, and now we're going to cut the 8 segments of the walnut. We do the same thing with the walnut, and there's the walnut segments cut. So now we've got all of our segments cut. We're ready to glue them together. Now, when you glue up your segments, you've got your lines marked on the stick. So when you glue up, you put you alternate inside mark and outside mark, and have the top marks always on top. What that does, by alternating inside and outside mark, that eliminates any I can't pronounce that word, but anyway, verticality of the saw. That's a big high dollar word Jerry Bennett used. If the saw blade is, or something is out of whack, by alternating these segments, they're going to line up perfect. The thing that you want to do is try to get a piece of wood in your stick where the grain. Flip down to this. There we go. Grain is pretty good, and you want to really use pretty much the same type grain pattern that you can. In other words, you don't want to have a stick running this way and then and have to use another stick in another layer where the grain is wavy or whatever. We try to match your grains up in both the segments, all of the segments. In fact. Yeah, you won't use any end grain. You use all side grain. The end grain is what you're gluing together, and it's all going to be outside with side grain. The whole ring, the outside, the inside will be side grain. The end grain will be glued together, and you won't see any of that in the segments. Okay. So we've got them all cut, and we're ready to glue up. We can go to the next one. What I use is a band clamp to glue the segments together. You can see we got alternating walnut and birch here. So that ring is glued up, and we do that with every ring in the project. And go to the next one. You can see we got the rings all glued up now. The base of the vase is glued to a glue block. I use face plates. You can use chucks if you want. Your chuck you'd have to draw, turn a recess or a tenon on the glue block prior to glue up. So now that we've got them all glued up, cut and glued up, we have to smooth the edges so that we can stack and glue the pieces together without any gaps in between the rings. So that's in there. Whoop. There we go. There we go. Okay, now we got a sand, and there's various ways to smooth up the sides or the top and the bottom of the ring. You can do it with a disc sander, then glue it onto the glue block or the base, and then true it up on the lathe. Or you can use belt sander such as this. This is the way I've done it for years. And recently, within the last couple of weeks, I've purchased a drum sander from a fellow woodworker that had to give up woodworking. And I wish I would have purchased a drum sander a long time ago. It sure makes it easy. So anyway, now I use a drum sander. So we've got the all the rings sanded and smooth on top, on the bottom. They all lay on top of one another without any gaps. And now it's time to glue them up. So there's different ways to glue these. You can glue them on the lathe one ring at a time. Some people have a press that they can use and can glue up the whole vessel at one time. I started using clamps, and clamps is just easy for me. So what I do is glue up 2 rings at a time, and then you stack them, and then you've got the whole thing glued up here. Just keep gluing them up and stacking them, and then you got a piece that's ready to turn. Base plate is there, so it's ready to go on the lathe and turn. And as far as turning, you can use basically the same tools that you use for any kind of turning. Gouges, chisels, scrapers, whatever your preference is. I like a bowl gouge. That's typically what I use. 3/4 inch bowl gouge for all my turnings. So this is ready to turn. We put it on the lathe, we turn it, and then now these next pictures are not going to be pictures of the thing that we made. It's just to show you examples of how you can do underneath side, the bottom turning. Once I had that vessel turned, I put it in cold jaws. Use the tailstock to kind of keep it in there until I get the little nib I don't want to turn off, and I move the tailstock back. Use different things. These are other pieces that I've used in the past to turn the bottoms of them. This just shows you use one of the pieces with a different base type thing on there. Again, using the tailstock, turn it down to a little nib, and then you knock the nib off and hand sand the base of it. So now we've got it sanded and we're done. So next is the finish. This is the finished product. Finish, I typically like wipe on gel poly. Wipe it on, wipe it off, and put about 2 coats on. I like to put 2 or 3 coats on the finished product. And then I've got this. This is it here. The same thing as the picture. Put a little pretty thing in the bottom of it. So that is how you do standard segmented turning. I hope there's some questions. Are there any questions on that part of it? Got any questions to ask? Okay. So now.
No, you're not ready. Not ready to quit yet. I always have questions, Lon.
Well, I was going to go to open segmented, but go ahead and ask questions.
Oh, okay. one of the things that I saw that I think was a really good safety point that you're doing right, and I just wanted to point that out to folks, the stop block that you're using, the position of that along your rip fence was so it's behind the blade. It's you don't want to put that stop block directly across from the blade, because then that segment is going to get wedged between the stop block and the blade, and you're going to have a nasty kickback opportunity.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
so see, if you put the stop block up forward, and I've seen people do that, and that's extremely dangerous to put it forward so it could catch that segment between the stop block and the blade. So I just wanted to point that out. You did it right, no question about that, but that's something I wanted to point out before I forgot it.
Well, and the other thing that I really didn't mention too much about is the deflective fence. That's another issue. If you just use your regular insert that comes on the saw, there's a pretty good gap between the blade and the right hand edge of the insert. A lot of air turbulence going on there, and when you cut a segment, that segment's going to move around a little bit, and if it gets around to where that blade can hit it, don't ask me how I know this, but it can wind up in your insulation in your ceiling of your shop, or on the wall of your shop. It'll kick it back quick. And when you're cutting segments, if you feel uneasy about any of them being close to that saw blade, well, shut the saw off and move them.
Yeah, good advice.
So, and the recommended distance between the stop block and the fence is what I've read and heard is like 4 inches, which gives you more room for the segments to, once they come off of the fence and then start hitting one another and being pushed to the right, you've got a lot more room for them to load up, as opposed to if you had the fence, you know, directly like that last picture.
Good.
So, how is the board attached there that's next to the saw blade to keep the segments from falling next to the blade? How's that attached?
I put mine on double-sided tape.
No, I've got this one screwed.
Oh, okay, okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
There's also double-sided tape under there, but because I put that on there to get it in position, but then I went ahead and drilled holes into it and screwed it on, just to keep it
Good, thank you.
moving.
Vaughn, I found that I use the digital calipers and digital angle finder that really help a lot on getting those angles and distances down to 3 points like you have there.
I agree. I don't have one of those, but no, you're right. It would. It would.
You can get a good digital calipers for $30, and really that's not too bad.
Yep. No, that's true. That's true. I've
worn out 3.
How's that?
I've worn out 3 already.
Well, I believe you. I believe you. So, any other questions before we get into the open?
I would like to make just one little comment. This is Steve.
Okay.
For those that are interested in segmented turning, this wedgie sled, just like Vaughn said, is the design of it and the plans are free online, and it's really a good thing to have. I made one and use it all the time. It's a really handy item to have, and it makes things real easy.
It's well worth going online and Get the
It's not-
plan. You can get the plans in a PDF file. I think's what they are.
Yeah, it's not that hard to make.
No, it's not. It's really easy. And it simplifies things so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, we'll go into the open segmented part. It's pretty much the same thing as segmented, only different. How that's that. Again, you have to have some kind of plan in place, how you're going to cut your segments, design your things, and once again, you can get them by book. My guy left me here. You can get them by book or out of off the internet. I got this one off the internet, and it gave the dimensions. It was like 8 3/4 inch tall and diameter rather, and 6 inches tall. So I just kind of designed my own plan on how I wanted to make that one. When I first started open segmented turning, this book by William Smith was, at my knowledge, the only thing around on open segmented turning, and it's a good book. It tells you how to go cut your segments. It gives how you glue them up on the lathe, one segment at a time. You make a jig. It's very explanatory on how you do open segmented work, and I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that this was long before the Seg Easy plate hit the market. The Seg Easy plate made it a lot easier, less complicated to do, and your segment nomenclature is the same as it is in the other segmented turning. The only difference is you have less, you have holes in between. The way there's a little different method in figuring the angle that you need to cut your segments, with the simple fact that part of it is missing. The segment is missing. So when you figure your angle that you want to set your jig to, and I had a sled. I made a sled, and like I say, this is pre Seg Easy plates, but the way you figure your angle that you need to cut your segments at is very similar to the other way. You take the circumference of the circle divided by the number of segments, divide that by 2, and that gives you the angle. But then there's another catch. A third of the segment is air, so you have to multiply that times 2/3 to get the degree of angle that you want to use for open segmented turning. Figuring the length of the segment is a little bit different too. It's tangent times the angle degree times 2 times the diameter you want. Well, I'm sure everybody wants to figure that out on everything they do. So in the book, the guy was nice enough to put a chart in here also. The top of the chart has your, there we go. Top of the chart gives you number of segments across, miter gauge angle, and then down the left-hand side gives you the diameter of the segment ring that you're wanting to make, and then it tells you how long you need to cut the segments. So that's very much the same way as conventional segmented turning is. Now, I've designed the project that we're going to work on here today. Drop a pointer. Very similar to what we had. No, I'm not a camera. There we go. Thank you, sir. Okay. Once again, we've got the diagram that I drew up here. We got the base, and then each ring going up and the top. Over here on the left, it's the diameter of each ring we want. Over here on the right, it's the thickness of each ring we want. And again, to figure the width, you go from this point to this point, or excuse me, this point to this point, and measure that. And then, like I say, I add about a ½ inch onto that for various reasons. You don't want to go through the edge again. And down here at the bottom, it says the base is solid. Rings 1 through 6 is open segmented, and ring 7 is solid segmented or closed, whatever. And then again, cherry, 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 Brazilian cherry, 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 and Brazilian cherry for the base. And up the top, you got the stick. We're going to have the stick of a ½ inch thick by 1 inch wide. And again, here we cut the segment length for each ring. Now, since they've come out with the Seg Easy plate, you purchase this Seg Easy plate. It's got a handy dandy little chart with it. It shows you the angle degree that you need to cut. This is an 18-piece plate, 18 segment plate. Shows you the degree of angle that you need to cut. And then over here, it tells you the diameter of each layer. And then the length, well, it says width, but it's actually length of segment that you need. It's metric and an inch both. So this is a good chart. So on this piece, we go with ring number 1. We wanted a 4½ inch diameter. So we go over here to 4½ inch diameter is a 0.6324 length of segment. So once again, I go to my chart that I developed myself here. 634 is somewhere in between 5/8 and 21/32. So once again, I'll set my length using the tape measure and set it somewhere in between those two lengths. Now, if you have a digital caliper, you can set that up perfect. So I've put on this each ring and the segment length that I'm going to need. So this plus means that I go in between somewhere. somewhere in between the two fractions. So that's the same way we did segmented, open segmented, pretty much the same. So now, and once again, the orientation of your board, your end grain is going to be, you'll be able to see the end grain, but it's going to be on the inside of the segment as opposed to the outside. It's going to be inside the holes. Okay, let's go cut some segments here. The first picture there. So we've got our sticks cut. They're 1/2 inch thick by 1 inch wide. So now I don't use a sled anymore. I just use the table saw and the miter gauge and a 0 clearance insert. What I did to get this angle, the wedgie. Let's take a look at the wedgie, or the Seg Easy plate rather. Sorry, got too many things going here. Wedgie and Seg. If you look, that's okay. If you look at this, there's your slot, your angle in the plate, 8 degrees. So I cut one. I set the table saw as close as I could to 8 degrees. Cut one segment, fit it in here, and if it fit good, I was okay. If it didn't fit good, I adjusted the blade until it fit in with no slop whatsoever on either side. That's how I determined how to set the saw up. Then once I had it set up where there was no slop, I cut a board and wrote on the board what it was for. And that's what I use as a guide to set up my miter gauge on the table saw. And then again, we use the same stop block. And of course, we can't use the deflector plate because we're cutting on the table. We're not above the table height. So use a 0 clearance insert. And that helps prevents the segments from getting actually between the blade and the regular insert or getting whipped around and flying all over the place. So you can see I've got the tape measure there set somewhere between 5/8 and whatever that was, 9/16 or something. But anyway, ready. We got the stop block set, measured out, perfect. We're ready to start cutting. Okay, we've moved the stop block back and attached it with a clamp to the fence. Got our stick in there. We're ready to make a cut to the angle we want. Next slide. We've cut a few segments. Once again, you're flipping the stick. Once you make a cut, you flip it and make another cut. Bring it back and measure it and make another cut. Okay, so now we've got our segments cut. Next slide. We've got our base plate glued, the base of the vessel glued to a stop block, or a waste block rather. And once again, I'm using a face plate. You can use a chuck. That's what you choose to use. So I've got a big disc sander that I've made. It's a piece of plywood, or excuse me, piece of MDF with about a 1/4 inch piece of aluminum bolted to that, and then the sticky sandpaper sheet stuck to that. I think it's about 12 inches in diameter or something like that. So we're smoothing up the base or glue up for the segments. Once we get that smoothed up, I drill a little recess to help me line up with my glue up stacking process. And then show you that here in a minute. It's a 5/8 inch Forstner bit with the tip, sharp tip ground off so all you leave in the base is a little recess which you turn out when you turn the vessel. Okay, next picture. And what I use, this is called a stomper. The directions for it, I'll give you that here. Fellow by the name of, oh guys, hang with me here. Woodturner Pro. You get the directions from Woodturner Pro, fellow by the name of Lloyd Johnson. He'll tell you how to make it. Woodturnerpro.com. What it is a 12-inch in-ground sprinkler head. You take it apart, and he tells you how to make it, where to get the hardware for it, and everything. And if you look at the top of it, you can see there's some threads up there that are the outside diameter of those threads are 5/8 of an inch, and that's where the recess that I cut into the base plate or the base of the vessel fits inside that, and it pushes down. That's how you align your rings up. So next picture. So put the Seg Easy plate over that. Now we're ready to start gluing our segments up. What it do is I'll take some, I don't know, 200, 220 grit sandpaper and knock the fuzzies off of the segments from the saw cut. I do that on the closed segmented turning also. Knock the fuzzies off from saw cuts so that they're not interfering with the glue up process. So we got the 18 segments that we've cut on the Seg Easy plate now. Now we're ready to put the glue to it. And I use tight bond translucent glue. When it dries, you cannot see it. It doesn't yellow or anything. It's transparent. We'll put that on all of the segments. Okay. Now we're ready to attach the base to the first ring. See, the base is on top now, lined up with the recess I put in it and the threads on the sprinkler rod, and we just push it down to the next slide. Push it down to the first ring and use a 10-pound weight to hold it in place. Usually I'll do this a ring a day or 2 rings a day, depends on what I've got going on. Next slide. Now, once that's dry and everything, then you put it back on the lathe and I sand it smooth using that this sander. Smooth it up and get it ready for the next ring. Now you can, next slide. You can glue these rings up on the lathe. But in fact, that's what I used to do before I found out about this stomper. But it ties up the lathe, and if I use the stomper, I can go out there in 5, 10, 15 minutes, have a layer ready to go, and glue it up, and then I can get on the lathe and do some turning. So what this does is eliminate, you tying up your lathe all the time. And the tailstock is fit in the back end of the seg plate attachment there. Okay, so now we've got the, and like I say, all this does, in my opinion, is free up your lathe. The way I do it now, it frees up your lathe for other projects. So we got the first ring on, sanded, and now we're putting the second ring on in the same manner. Okay. You continue doing that until your last glue up, and this is the last glue up. So that's like we got it ready, and once it's dry, then I'll sand it, and so we're ready. We're ready for the top ring, which is going to be a closed segmented ring. So we're ready to cut that ring, and we set our saw up again. Cut that ring. Excellent. Cut the segments same way we did in the open segment or the closed segmented. We got our ring made. Now we've got to sand it like we did in the other ones. And next slide. And now it's all sanded, smooth, ready to glue together. And now we've got it glued together. Again, I use clamps. You can do it on the lathe. You can use a press, whatever your preference is. I prefer this because if I glue it up on the lathe, it's once again, it's going to tie up my lathe. So this is the way I do it. Once this is dry, and next slide, we're ready. We've got something we're ready to turn. Once again, you turn this the same way you would any vessel. You turn it the same way you did the segmented turning. The only thing is you might want to increase the speed a little bit because you've got these holes in here and you're cutting some air. So I turn this a little bit faster than I do the other, but I use the same tool. I use a 3/4 inch bowl gouge with the swept back wings. That's my preference of the tool to use on this. So, and you sand these on the lathe. I didn't mention sanding in the segmented sanding, but you sand that the same way you would any other thing. I sand the outside of this the same way I do most things. On the inside, I wrap some sandpaper around a stick or something because you don't want to hold the sandpaper in your hand on the inside because there's a chance that those openings grab the sandpaper, throw your hand around, sprain your wrist, or even worse than that, cut the heck out of it. So I have sandpaper held in something. I want to sand the inside, or we can sand it with a drill sander also. So anyway, you don't want to touch the inside while it's spinning with your bare hand for safety reasons. So, okay, so now we would finish the bottom the same way I did the other pieces, or any way you finish any of your pieces. So this is the finished product. And this is the base of it. Got some 40 gigs in there, and I've got this is the piece here. Once again. Now, that is that. Forget the next slide. Okay, and earlier I mentioned you can incorporate this in open and closed segmented turning into the same project. You can see that next to the top ring here is open, and the rest of it is closed segmented. On this one, you can see the outer ring is closed segmented, and the inner ring is open segment. So you can either do it all of one way, or you can use both methods in whatever project you want to use. Okay. And this is where just a sheet showing you where I got all the stuff, and I can have Ray or David send this out to the club. The stomper, the directions are from woodturnerpro.com. The Seg Easy plates can be purchased at woodturnerpro.com, craft supplies, or segueasy.com. I think Craft Supplies only has two plates, 18, and I'm not sure what the other one is. But segueasy.com has 3 or 4 different numbers of segments, and also sizes. They have 8 size, or the 8-inch, 10-inch, or 14-inch something. Anyway, segueasy.com has a larger selection. The Wedgie Sled, again, segueasy.com, segmentology section of that. It's a PDF file. It's free. You go in there and you can download that. And like talked about earlier, they're real easy to make. Wedgies, segueasy.com, they offer them 1 at a time, or I think they've got packages of 4 or 8. And then, of course, the books, I don't know, Amazon or would I know Craft Supplies have some books, whatever. But if you're really wanting to buy a book at wood turning with Ray Allen and one that was Ron Hampton, segmented turning, are the 2 that I would recommend. They're very good. And then the patterns, I know Craft Supplies used to sell some patterns, but I haven't seen them in their catalog for some time. But the website, the Bowl Kit Company, that, still sells patterns. Is there any questions that we'll try to answer?
Yeah, does anybody know if our library has any of those books available?
Joe, are you? Yeah, Joe.
Yes, we do have one. I'm not sure which one it is. It's one that Dave recommended that we buy, I believe, if I remember correctly. He said it was a very good book on segmented turning.
Right, the one that I recommended, and forgive me, I don't remember the title, but it's by Malcolm Tibbetts. Malcolm is kind of the guru of segmented turning. And anyway, he has a series of DVDs that are probably going to go out of production, since DVDs are kind of going by the wayside too. But he's got a series of video DVDs that are really good as well. I have that set and highly recommend them. But I don't remember, Joe, if we have any of those others like the Dale Nish book, but I have that one also on my shelf, and it's a very good reference. But
I
I'll
just
send that
remember,
list. Yeah,
I know,
I just remember having the one.
okay.
I know this book is also on CD, but the CD does not go into the detail that this book does. I don't believe it has the patterns in the back. Like I say, it's got numbers of patterns that you can make. And then it's also has how to make feature rings in it. There's a number of pages of that, and then, like I say, it is just really full of pictures, and all the pictures there is a pattern diagram in the back here that, for the most part, you can make those pictures. You just have to make your own design or figure out how he did it. And in the front of it, it describes how he does his work. I'm not sure it talks about how to make a sled or anything, because I think he cut his on his bandsaw and then had a jig that he used on a disc sander to get the segments to the exact angle. But yeah, it's a very good book. And then my second choice would be this Ron Hampton book with the charts in the back of it. It's got compound miter cuts, angles, and lengths, and all that, and then it's also got how to make various vessels also. And in fact, I think it tells you how you can make a sled. But if you make the wedgie sled, that's the only thing you're ever going to need. So anyway, any other questions?
Dave, I believe the book you were talking about is The Art of Segmented Wood Turning, step-by-step guide. They sell it. They sell all these books on Amazon, by the way.
Yes.
Every one of them.
Yes.
I think I got mine from, I don't know, I bought one of them at Woodcraft in Kansas City, and the rest of them came from Craft Supply or something. I've had it for 15 years or better.
Couple suggestions on that I have used myself. The wedgie sled, like you said, is just the best thing ever. I only use the wedgie sled for most things. In fact, for open segmented, I've made my own wedges. You can make your own wedges, of course, out of high density plastic if you have that. You can buy that from industrial suppliers, or you can go down to Walmart or Menards or Target or whatever, buy a plastic cutting board. It's about a 1/4 inch thick. You can cut it on your bandsaw, on your table saw, whatever. Cut that to the angle you need. And yeah, you may have to tweak the angle a little bit unless you're cutting it on a CNC machine or something. But you can make your own wedges custom made for your open segmented projects. And I've done that. It works good. I mean, you can use MDF for wedges. It's just as humidity changes in your shop, so will that MDF swell and change dimensions. But plastic cutting board, something I've used. Don't go to the kitchen and borrow the one from your spouse. Go to the store and buy one. Anyway, don't ask me how I know that. The other thing I was going to mention, you brought up a good safety tip there, Vaughn, about not sanding with your fist and your sandpaper for open segmented especially. Because I always remind myself, that thing looks like a cheese grater, one of these rotary cheese graters. Right. You don't want to stick your hand in there, duh. But you brought up a good safety tip. The other thing that is really, really nice about segmented turning in general, you can build up a few layers and then turn those layers that you've built up on the inside, and then go on with some more layers and turn those. So you don't need any of that fancy hollowing equipment to get down into a 16-inch deep vessel. You can do it a few layers at a time. Much safer. And the beauty of turning that stuff, it's all side grain. You're not cutting end grain. You don't have the problem with tear out and so on that you would with conventional chunk turning. And so just few comments. You made some good points though about safety, and I just wanted to reiterate that there are some really good benefits if you build up a few layers. You can even sand and some people even finish those layers before they build up the next set of layers. Makes it much easier.
Yeah,
Right.
this is Victor here. I want to comment on what you were saying there, David. If you're doing open segmented and you want to build up a few layers, it's a good idea not to try to do anything with that last layer that you just glued on.
Right,
Back
definitely.
down in and get some of the earlier layers, but leave that last layer alone till you get some more on top of it, because that last one has very little holding it there.
Right. You don't want to knock that off.
Yeah, and I want to say something else too. I've been a great evangelist, as you know, for segmented work. And I like to throw in the idea that the sky is the limit on what you can do for patterns on these. Mixing and matching woods, you can do just almost anything with it. If you can imagine it, you can make it. Get all the different kinds of wood and contrast woods and everything else. And don't depend what you see in a book. Use your imagination.
That's good.
way to
That's
use up
good.
all your old scrap.
I might add what David said about the plastic, making your own plastic wedges for the open segmented. If you do that and you're using Wedgie Sled, then it's a lot, to me, it would be a lot safer doing it that way than the way I do it, because you could use your deflector to get them away from the saw blade because you're up above the table.
Yeah, that deflector works really well. Now you can still get a big pileup of segments there, especially if you're doing larger segments.
Right.
But you don't have to stop the saw after every cut for safety's sake. You can do several and then stop.
Right. Yep. I'm glad you mentioned that about making your own, because that would be very simple to do. It'd be easier to do that than it would be make one for the regular segmented, I would think.
Yeah. Well, any other questions for Vaughn? Wow, that's been really informative, Vaughn, and you did a good job of showing the closed and open segment processes. Makes me, or it reminds me, it's been a while since I've made an open segmented piece. I'm going to go back to the shop and try to do that. In fact, I challenge everybody to try your hand at segmented stuff. Take something simple and build it. See what you can do. It's great fun. Of course,
Amen.
I was going to mention this and I forgot, but Ray's got a Wedgie Sled here that he made, and on mine, on the sled, on the runner, mine was a steel one, and it matched up my miter slot perfect. You can use a wood one, and the directions tell you about this, but wood swells and shrinks in due to temperature or humidity. So if you cut a slot in the runner, front and back, and then you can put a screw in there, and like that, and then you can adjust that so there's no slop in your fence, or in your slot, in your miter slot. So that's another thing that will help you in your construction of your sled. Like I say, mine was steel, so there's no give or go on it. But if you use wood, it's a good idea to make that adjustment so that you can adjust it due to shrinkage or swelling. So anyway, I forgot to mention